What's up, everybody? Alex from the Impact Factor here. And wouldn't you guess it, another day, another month, another week, another new Hearthstone adventure. That's right. Last time, if you check here on this Impact Factor YouTube channel, we reviewed Whispers of the Old Gods. We found 15 cards that we were excited. One Night in Karazhan is the new Hearthstone adventure, not expansion, but I found 10 cards that made me excited. Let's go a little bit of background here before we get into the 10 cards themselves that make me excited. Firstly, this is a new adventure, similar to the Curse of Naxxramas or the Black Rock Mountain, or the most recently, I think the most similar comparison here is to the League of Explorers. This will be a 4-winged adventure. It's 4 different weeks of fighting bosses and getting individual rewards. There will be 45 new cards added to the set, and you could buy it for 20 bucks or with gold. So let's just go briefly into One Night in Karazhan and the state of the meta. One Night in Karazhan comes at a time where the meta is kind of in and out. It's one half good, one half a lot of people are upset. It's probably the most diverse meta we've seen in a long time, with lots of different decks. Almost 8 of the 9 classes being played to some extent in competitive play and on the ladder. However, one of the complaints here being that a couple of the decks and a couple of the classes have a lot of great tools, including Warrior. Right now, Warrior and Shaman are very strong, whereas one class in particular, Priest, is not very strong. So One Night in Karazhan is introducing 45 new cards, and I think regardless of what we see here, this is going to have some impact on Standard, at least. In the Standard format, there's not as many cards, you know. They cut out a lot. They cut out GVG, they cut out Naxxramas. And so it's nice to have this new infusion of cards. So regardless of what I'm going to say here, they'll probably have some effect. Overall, though, One Night in Karazhan looks to be a very flavorful, very fun adventure. I really like the aesthetic they have. If you haven't seen the release or the launch trailer for it, it has this very groovy disco vibe to what is allegedly a very dark and spooky World of Warcraft raid. And so I think it's going to be flavorful and fun. But overall, I'd say the 45 cards on a power level standing are a little bit weaker than what we've seen before. Certainly, they look to make less of an impact than League of Explorers did when it launched, and certainly less of an impact than Whispers of the Old Gods. Regardless here, we've got 10 cards and I'm excited, and whether or not they see home in a competitive play, like in tournaments or on the ladder, I think these are the 10 cards that have me excited to try out new things or to reinforce things that I tried before and didn't quite work because I was lacking the tools. So let's get into it. The first card here we have is Enchanted Raven. Why am I spotlighting this? There's no text on the card. It's a 1 mana, 2 attack, 2 health druid minion. And, even though there's no text in the text box, there is one text on this card that's very important, and that's at the bottom. It's a beast. Enchanted Raven, I think, is Blizzard giving the extra tools to Druid to finally make a Beast Druid deck work. They've been giving slowly Druid tools over time, because you had your original, you had your Druid of the Claw, you had your Druid of the Fang, you have your Druid of the Saber, etc. All those are beasts. And then they started giving Wind Walker, I believe is the name of the card, as well as other beast druids, but nothing really clicked. In Whispers of the Old Gods, there's a really powerful tool, Mark of Isaraj, which is a 2 mana spell, give a minion +2/+2. If it is a beast, draw a card. But still, Beast Druid remained as kind of tier 3, almost tier 4 deck, just because it doesn't have all the tools. I think this is a great tool for Beast Druid. A 1 mana 2/2 is pushing the power curve already. I mean, we've seen 1 mana 2/3s, but with drawbacks. You have your Zombie Chows, which when it dies restores 5 health to your opponent, or conditional 1 mana 2/3s, like given, your Twilight Whelp in a dragon deck. So I think it's 1 mana 2/2 without any conditions is pretty solid. Druid has always been lacking a 1-drop anyway. Right now everyone just plays Living Roots, and I typically turn 1 at Living Roots into 2 1/1s, and so stat-wise it's the same. So maybe not the most exciting, but this being a beast is important. The obvious strength here is that you could drop this to activate other beast synergy cards. For 1 mana, it's nice to plop out a 2/2, won't die to a hero power or a ping. Additionally, turn 1 this into turn 2 Mark of Isaraj is pretty insane, because you have your 2/2 on your board turn 1, then on turn 2, it's a 4/4, so you can clear those pesky totem golems on turn 2, as well as you just drew a card. So it cantrips off of the Mark of Isaraj. Whether or not this pushes Beast Druid into actually being a tier 2 or tier 1 deck, I'm not sure. But I could see this being played even in non-Beast Druid decks, just because it's nice to have a 2/2 out on the board. Just to clear some things. I think in earlier meta, maybe last year, this would be even more powerful. But as it stands now, 1 mana, 2/2 is pretty darn good, and maybe is what pushes Beast Druid into being competitive. We'll see. Next card up here is a Hunter card. It is a Beast as well. It is a 2 mana minion, 1 attack, 1 health, so the stats don't sound very good, but this one does have text. It reads Death Rattle, summon a 3/2 Big Bad Wolf. And I just realized I didn't say its name. It's the Kindly Grandmother, as you can see from this picture here. So very reminiscent of Red Riding Hood, Kindly Grandmother, and the Big Bad Wolf. An initial read of this I thought it was not that powerful, and might not see play. It's like a 2 mana 1/1, you do have to trade into it, and then you just get a 3/2 body anyway, and I feel like, especially in the meta we have right now, 2/3s are a lot more popular than 3/2s, and those trade evenly. So I was like, no, this isn't so great. But the more I thought about this is a really annoying minion to deal with on turn 2. Mid-range Hunter has been hovering around tier 2, high tier 3 for a while now. I've been a mid-range Hunter player since I started playing this game, so I'm always excited when new tools come out. But I think this is a pretty good one. So the 2 mana 1/1 isn't great. At the stand of the meta right now, it doesn't really trade into anything. Certainly you could trade this with something else up, but not a lot of minions are played these days that have 1 health anymore. You know, the Leper Gnomes are no longer an issue. You don't have as much Paladins on the ladder, so you can't trade into Silverhand Recruits. And the only one that plays 1/1s are Warlocks, but a lot of those, like Possessed Villager, you trade into 1/1, they still have a 1/1 left. However, dealing with this, you do get 1 damage onto your target, and then you get the 3/2 Big Bad Wolf, which is also a beast. So this is nice. It gives a little bit of sticky ability. Hunters right now have had a weird place for 2-drops. You play some sort of combination of Huge Toads, King's Alex, and Flame Jugglers, and all of those feel good, but none of them are thrilled. You know, it's not like the old days of Knife Juggler, where you're just like, yes, you feel great to drop it on turn 2. I'm not sure if this is great to drop on turn 2 as well, but I like it, and it gives some stickiness and some annoyance that I think Hunter needs to kind of fight for the early game. Since right now, so much of Hearthstone's standard meta is determined by early game as soon as possible. You need to get those minions on the board, because otherwise you're going to lose to a turn 4 7/7. It's going to happen. Next card is the Cloaked Huntress, another Hunter card. So out of 10 cards, 2 are Hunters. Maybe I have a little bit of bias, who knows. This is also a minion. It is a 3 mana minion, 3 attack, 4 health. And the card text reads, your secrets cost 0. So even if this didn't have a card text, this passes my vanilla test. I think a vanilla test, it should have the same attack as its cost and 1 more health. So a 2 mana card should be a 2/3 or a 3/2, and a 3 mana card should be a 3/4 or 4/3. 3/4 being better. And so just a vanilla test here, a 3 mana 3/4 for Hunter is not bad. So this isn't a beast, which is a downside, but its ability is pretty powerful here. So ever since Mad Scientist rotated out of the metagame, it's been an awkward spot to run Hunter's traps, or the Hunter secrets, your freezing traps, your explosive traps, your bear traps, your dart traps, now your cat traps. There's a new trap in this expansion that's not very good. Because it just feels bad to spend the 2 mana on it. You know, when secrets are free, they're great, but when you have to slow yourself down and play them for their full mana cost, they're less good. And so I feel like a lot of Hunters lists don't really run secrets, or maybe one freezing trap or 1 explosive trap. So this gives you some nice versatility. On turn 3, you can drop this and drop a 2 mana spell. So if you're thinking about a mid-range or a tempo-oriented Hunter deck, you could drop this turn 3 and then get essentially a free 2 mana spell. So you got a 5 mana value for 3, and you got a 3/4 on the board. And so whether or not this makes a more secret-based Hunter more viable is up to the question. This would be a new archetype, because a lot of Hunters have just kind of gone this beast synergy mid-range list, where secrets don't really make the cuts. So this could introduce a new, what is old is new again archetype of Secrets Hunter. But I really like her. Cloaked Huntress seems really fun, and I like that ability. It's going to be able to stay on the board at least decently well until you face that turn 4 7/7. But I do like this ability, and hopefully it can make secrets playable, because you need a way to cheat them out to make them really good. So I'm excited. We'll see. I'll probably play around with her at the very least. Next up, we've got a Paladin card, a Paladin minion, the Nightbane Templar. It is a 3 mana minion. It has 2 attack and 3 health, so those stats not great here. So what does this text say? It reads, Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, summon 2 1/1 whelps. So this card has already been jokingly called online the new Doctor 3. Anything that summons 2 1/1s is a doctor. This I think has the potential to be pretty good. So when dragons started being a thing with Blackrock Mountain, but then really more realistically, once the Grand Tournament came out, everyone was like, well, who's gonna have the best dragon deck? Paladin got some really good dragons. that has that one specific dragon, the 5 mana 5/5 that reduces your next dragon cost by 3 or 2. I don't know. I don't play Dragon Paladin, but it turns out Dragon deck's just much better in Warrior. You've got more removal options with your Fiery War Axes and your Executes and your Blood to Icors. But this gives a very powerful tool. So its stats itself aren't great. I know they're pretty bad. A 3 mana 2/3 is not good. And if you compare this to one of the basic cards, the Razorfin Hunter, it summons just another 1/1 for free without contingency here. This one summons 2, and I think that makes a big difference. So if you add up the stats here, this could be, if you're holding a dragon, and most dragon decks now, there are enough good dragons you can consistently have one in your hand within the first 3 turns, is a 4/5 worth of stats for 4, or for 3. And that's not exactly fair. But I think this is good. It could help you fight the board. You got 2 separate 1/1s, as well as, this 2/3 body that's not bad. Along with some other things, I think a Dragon Paladin might be on our horizon. I don't know, though, because Dragon Warrior is such a powerful archetype. But certainly this gives more tools to Paladin to start to fight back into the meta. Because if Priest is not in the meta at all, Paladin is kind of very lowly hanging in there. There's some control in the Zoth Paladin decks, but it seems like they're pretty low in the meta. So this could potentially reinvigorate, maybe get some tempo or mid-range oriented Paladin decks. So I'm excited. I'm gonna try it out. There's enough good dragons. I'm itching to play my old friend Uther again. Next card up here we have is Medivh's Valet. It is a 2 mana minion, 2/3. Vanilla test, good. But it also says Battle Cry. If you control a secret, deal 3 damage. So wow, Fire Elemental effect right here. So, I mean, besides the art being great with this monkey holding a fireball, this, I think, could also, of the 10 cards I talk about, open up the possibility for a new archetype, and that's Secret Mage. Again, everything I'm saying here is tempo and mid-range, but it seems like that's what's good right now. People have long speculated that, if you get some sort of tempo, board control, oriented mage, and then you have Ice Block as one of your secrets, that Ice Block is going to be there forever. There are very few tools to get rid of secrets without actually activating them. And so if you perpetually have a secret up, you have this activator here. So a 2 mana 2/3 that deals 3 damage. So it's not just to a minion, by the way, too. You can do this to face. And so if you think about this is, if you have a secret up, this is kind of like your Forgotten Torch for 2 mana, or even cheaper. It could be like a Frostbolt without the freeze effect. So I think this is really good. Potentially, you run some sort of deck with maybe not Mirror Teeth, I think they're kind of weak in the meta, but maybe an Ice Block, even an Effigy, just something to keep your tempo up. And certainly, Ice Block will be up forever, allows you to survive 1 turn and push for the lethal. I'm not sure how Medivh's Valet is going to fit in. I mean, on turn 2, he's not bad because he's just a 2/3, he passes the vanilla test. But certainly gets better if you're running a Curator Mage and you get your secret out for free on turn 3, and certainly if you can keep an Ice Block up. So he's very interesting. I like the way he's designed. I'm not sure, again, how much of an impact he's going to make. But I'd be excited to toy around with Secret Mage, because fun fact, back in the day, I had a tempo-based Secret Mage deck that got me for the first time past rank 10. Now, I mean, since then, I get to rank 5 pretty consistently, but the first one for me to break rank 10 was Secret Mage. So I have a little bit of fondness for the archetype in my heart, so we'll see. I'm excited. The last class card we have here is Melkas Imp. This is a Warlock minion. It is 1 mana, 1 attack, 3 health, so pretty good stat line for a 1/3. We've seen a lot of 1/3s be powerful with your Tunnel Trogs and with your Mana Worms. And this one I think has the potential to be powerful too. So it's a demon, which I don't think is super important. But its card text reads, whenever you discard a card, draw a card. And so Blizzard recently in these past 2 or 3 sets have been really pushing, trying to make a discard Warlock deck work. So some people have been calling it Discard Lock. I think in the spirit of Medivh's Disco Dance Party, it should be Disco Lock if it does become a thing. But this is a really good tool here. So 1 mana 1/3 in an aggressive zoo type deck in Warlock is already pretty good. It enables you to have good trades as a decent body. You can power overwhelming it, etc., so forth. But this opens up more opportunities to run more discard cards. So ever since Soulfire got changed from 0 mana to 1, a lot less people have been playing it, because 1 mana deal 4 damage is pretty good, but you have that pretty brutal discard if you have to spend a mana for it. But here, if you've got this Imp out, you you can Soulfire, and that card you discarded gets replaced with a new card in your deck. And typically that's not too much of a problem for you because you're drawing tons of cards anyway. So the card you lose from the discard gets replaced, and you can keep your tempo going. So certainly some people have tried to build around this using succubuses, as well as other discard effects. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's just going to enable you to run Soulfires in a zoo deck. So I think you could use these discard mechanics, some tiny Knights of Evil, Melkas Imps, maybe even a Fist of Jaraxxus, I'm not sure, and have a more aggressive, make it a very aggro zoo. So you'll have your Possessed Villager, slow 1/1s dudes, zoo that has more board control and overwhelm them with just sheer number of people, and your Sea Giants. And this one could be, you just keep things pumping out with discards and burns, and if you're running Fist of Jaraxxus or just Soulfire, you've got more direct damage to the face. So I think Melkas Imp, if there is some sort of Disco Warlock, see, it's already catching, if there is some sort of Disco Warlock archetype that will spring up, I think the Imp has a very good chance at inclusion, even more than its other discard Warlock minion that we got from this set. So, moving on to the one and only epic we're going to talk about. It is a neutral epic. This is the Arcane Giant. It is a 12 mana minion, so you can't play it unless it gets a discount. 8 attack, 8 health, and its text reads, costs 1 less for each spell you've cast this game. So the second this was revealed, everyone's like, oh, it's a Yogg-Saron's Giant. Just rename it to Yogg-Saron's Giant. And I don't think people are wrong, because we've seen just how powerful Yogg-Saron decks are. You see Yogg-Saron at the tail end of a Tempo/Flamewaker Mage, and then you have some Yogg decks that are just completely built around having an insane Yogg at the end. So I've seen some Shaman lists, and then most notably Yogg Druid as a very powerful archetype. And so let's think about how many spells you have to cast for this to be a reasonable minion. So you want to cast at least 5 spells before playing this, because then if you cast 5 spells, this would be a 7 mana 8/8, which is good. It's reasonable. It's fine. We'll see there's another 7 mana 8/8 coming up. But you wouldn't really want to play that. But as soon as it gets below that, you start getting some pretty crazy value. A 6 mana 8/8, 5 mana 8/8, and then it just gets nuttier from there. Especially in something like a Yogg Druid, if you're playing Raven Idols, you can get spells off of spells, or if you play your Wild Growths on turn 10, that's a spell into that excess mana spell. And so I find there's going to probably be ways for very Yogg-centric decks to be able to play this Arcane Giant for free. You can, I think he gives you another guaranteed big potential threat for a Yogg deck. Because sometimes, in my experience playing Yogg-Saron decks, you kind of run out of steam sometimes. If you lose the board, you're kind of like, oh man, I hope I draw my Yogg-Saron soon, and I really hope my Yogg-Saron casts a Doom or a Hellfire or a Vanish or something. But this is another way that while you're building up your spell count to have your crazy Yogg, you can drop this Arcane Giant for 2 mana, 1 mana, but even 0. You could probably cast it for free. But even if you're casting it for 4 or 5 mana, I think that's still pretty good. So I'm not sure how much of an impact it's going to have, but I think I'd be excited to play it in some very spell-based heavy, likely Yogg-Saron deck. Then we move on to our suite of legendaries to wrap up these 10 cards that got me excited. The first here is Barnes. He is a 4 mana minion with 3 attack, 4 health, so his stats are bad. The stats would match up for the vanilla test, my vanilla test, to be a 3 mana minion. But he doesn't have an effect. He has a battle cry that reads, summon a 1/1 copy of a random minion from your deck. And so, even if this 1/1 was just another 4 mana 3/4 summon a 1/1, the card would be fine, okay. But a 1/1 copy of a random in your deck has potential to be very powerful. So if you think about cards that have activated abilities, you've got a lot of good options. So say Barnes pulls a Ragnaros from your deck. He's a 1/1, but he's the 1/1 that's doing 8 damage to a random enemy target at the end of your turn. Or any other end of turn effects, a Ysera, or just Ragnaros Lightlord. So the options to have a very powerful effect that happens, at the end of your turn is great. But then when you consider running this in some sort of Death Rattle themed deck or some N'Zoth themed deck, I think that's when you start to see a lot of value out of this. If you have some sort of very Death Rattle centric deck, even an Infested Tauren, you'd be a 1/1 taunt, summons a 2/2. Or if you do a Twilight Summoner, it's the same thing as a Twilight Summoner itself. It'd be a 1/1 that summons a 5/5 when it dies. Or even another Loot Hoarder. I think you get a lot of options and a lot of versatility running Death Rattles. If you have this, say, in an N'Zoth Hunter, getting a 1/1 high main is really good because you have two beasts that are going to come out of that. I think there's a lot of versatility for this card. The 4 slot is nowhere near as crowded or competitive as it used to be now that Piloted Shredder isn't in Standard. I think this is going to go in slower, more control-y decks. You're not going to want to put it in a tempo or a mid-range deck, because if this misses, it's kind of bad to drop on turn 4. If you get, like, if you whiff on Barnes, it's not going to feel great. But certainly I think it'd be fun to try and squeeze them into a Zoth deck, a Death Rattle deck, or even a deck that have a lot of these big minions that have end-of-effect turns. A Dragon deck could even be good. So we'll see. The fate of Barnes is uncertain, but he's excited. That's what this whole video is about. Next up we have the Curator. This was one of the first cards revealed. He is a 7-mana minion, 4 attack, 6 health, a mech. Stats aren't spectacular, though not terrible. He does have Taunt, but he also has a Battle Cry. The Battle Cry reads, draw a Beast, Dragon, and Murloc from your deck. So let's think about this. A lot of decks don't run a Beast, a Dragon, and a Murloc. However, there's ways you can work around this that you do run at least one of those to make your deck pretty good. So if this is a 7-mana 4/6 draw 1 card, not so great. But I think once you start drawing 2 cards, a 7-mana 4/6 that draws 2 cards, we've got old school Ancient of Lore territory there, and that Ancient of Lore got nerfed because it was so good. So drawing 2 cards is really good, and if you draw 3, that's insane. So let's think about this. If you're playing this, say, in some control deck, this is going to be in a slower deck, what beast could you have? So one option you have is maybe you have some sort of Reno Hunter list where you get a Savannah Highmane for your beast, a dragon, you could draw an Azure Drake or any Deathwing as a contingency plan, and a Murloc. There's that Cold Light. Oh my gosh, I'm not even remember the name of it. But you've got Murlocs that are an option. There is the 6-mana Murloc or the 5-mana Murloc that deals 2 damage to all non-Murlocs. I should have researched that. But even just drawing 2 is good. So I think if you move away from the Hunter territory where they have class-specific beasts, say if you find, I think a lot of decks could probably squeeze a Stranglethorn Tiger into their decks. The 5-mana 5/5 with stealth is really good. And so I think if you can draw this beast and draw Dragon, potentially just switch up your normal 5-drops for Azure Drakes, Stranglethorn Tiger. And if this draws 2 of those, that's really good. So any kind of control decks, you can also fit that board wipe Murloc into it. I think this has a lot of possibilities, because exactly, if this draws 2 cards, you're really happy, and if you can draw 3, that's insane. And he's a taunt, so you can help prevent 6 damage to you. So I'm excited to toy around with the Curator. Got a lot of ideas to try and make a deck that can take full advantage of his card draw. I'm sure someone's going to think about putting him in some sort of combo deck, because anything that guarantees draw to your deck, say the only dragon you run is Alexstrasza. You just drew an Alexstrasza into your hand. It gives you 2 opportunities in your deck to get an Alexstrasza, and that's pretty good. So I'm excited for the possibilities of Curator. It's a deck builder's wet dream, I think. And the final card we have, these 10 cards, is Medivh the Guardian. That's right, the man himself who's throwing the party. He is an 8-mana legendary minion, 7 attack, 7 health, and he has text that reads Battle Cry, equip Atesh, Great Staff of the Guardian. So 8 mana, 7/7. Now, thankfully, that Big Game Hunter has been changed. I no longer need to be like, guy's a Big Game Hunter. But even if Big Game Hunter was still around, this card is pretty solid. So 8 mana, 7/7, whatever, not spectacular. But it's nice to have a 7/7 on the board that is a big body. Let's look at his staff, though, which is what really makes him special. The staff, you can ignore the cost, again, because this will only be if the weapon gets returned to your hand. So you'll equip this 1/3 weapon. And Atesh reads, after you cast a spell, summon a random minion of that cost. This is 1 durability. So we've seen this effect on summoning, on your summoning portal, summoning stone. And this is a very powerful effect, because you get the effect of whatever the spell is, as well as getting a minion of that cost. And a lot of decks run some expensive spells that can make this worth this. So we've talked about Paladin, so if you cast there's a lot of good minions at the 8 cost slot. So if you cast the Lay on Hands on yourself, and you summon a Ragnaros, that's going to be great. So of course, there's the anything can happen dream too. But I think any spell 5 or above, you're going to get really crazy value out of this. And the staff, again, is a weapon, so it's staying there. You can completely control what spells you cast to have this effect take place. Of course, this is going to emphasize, I think, a meta where it's like, you're probably going to need to run... at this point in the meta, you probably should run an Acidic Swamp Ooze or a Harrison if you can afford to anyway, just by given the number of warriors on the ladder. But certainly, I think if this becomes a thing, you better craft the Harrison or run some oozes in your deck. Because this is an insane fact. It goes off 3 times. So people are already thinking, oh, Hunter, you Call of the Wild, you get your 3 animal companions, and then you get an 8-cost minion. That's pretty crazy. So I think there's a lot of potential here for our old friend Medivh. He's got a good body. He's got a great weapon, first staff weapon in Hearthstone. And he has me excited. I know I want to try and make a deck that makes use of him, get some big, crazy, swingy turn off. Granted, that's going to be if I can survive long enough to do so. So that'll do it for my 10 cards that got me excited from One Night in Karazhan. Of course, this is an expansion. It launches August 11th, 45 new cards. We get to play around, we get to fight some fun bosses. I'm excited. Anything that adds new cards to the metagame gets me pumped. What do you think of the cards? What do you think of my 10? Would you have chosen different cards? What did you think of my predictions? Any deck, any card you are excited about, let me know in the comments wherever you're watching this. Again, everything you need to know about me is in the description. I'm a PhD scientist, biomedical sciences, but I love writing, talking, and making videos about video games over on the Impact Factor. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, make an impact.